and then the person who stole it. There's a question of the person who was stolen from can testify on behalf of the person who bought it or not, whether the person is considered an interested party whose testimony is disqualified. But with the point that I didn't emphasize yesterday is that in order to do that, the Gemara changed the normal understanding of achrayas as being guaranteeing the sale against being attacked. The Gemara changed the word achrayas to be sensitive to mean a person's focus or their aim. You're saying in one case he's aiming about this one or aiming about that. Okay, good. On the basis of that, though, we completely reinterpreted the brisa, and we said, "Oh, listen, if Reuven stole something from Reuven stole a field from Shimon and sold it to Levi, and then Yehuda comes and says that the whole ownership was never from the person it was stolen from anyway." So then the question is whether Shimon, who it was stolen from, can go and testify on behalf of the person who bought his stolen property against the person who's claiming that they own the field originally. So the Gemara said he can't, and he can't. And why is that? Because he is interested in keeping it in the hands of the person who bought it from the thief, because he'll have an easier time getting it away from that person than getting it away from the person who claims that he owned the field originally. So therefore, because he's interested, so he said that he is disqualified. That's how we read the brisa up until now. So now the Gemara at the top of Mevdalad says, it says, I, Balokma Bagazan. Why already, if you want to teach that principle? I get it. You want to teach me that the person is an interested party because he wants to deal with this one and that one. Great. But why did the Bryce have to choose such a complicated case according to you? That Reuven stole from Shimon and sold it to Levi, and Shimon, and then Yehuda comes and claims that he owned the field originally. And Shimon, who was stolen from, wants to testify against Yehuda, said he owned it originally. What do you need all that for? Why don't you learn it simply? That here, a person stole it, and he never sold it. And in the meantime, somebody claims that the field that Shimon claims was stolen from him was never his. Okay, and the question is, we'll say what, and just say what, that he can't testify against the original owner on behalf.
He did sell it. He stole it and sold it.
No. The Gemara is asking like this. Gemara is asking, instead of having such a complicated case, have a case simply where a person stole it from Shimon, and now another person claims that the field that Shimon says was stolen from him never belonged to him. So the question is whether Shimon can go and testify on behalf of the thief, against the person who claims that Shimon never owned it. Why? Because he'd rather deal with the thief than deal with the original claimant. Okay, so you want to learn understanding. Why would the Bryce have chosen such a complicated case? The Gemara says you're right. It is more complicated than necessary, but it chose it. Why? In order to keep it, because I told you often we want parity in the Mishnah, because I told you the tradition is so large. Just to give an example of the type of things we're talking about, you would have the Gaon of Vilna, for example. We'll talk about having scores of explanations of a given pasuk. Here, it's like 70, 72, 150. I think he corrected the Zohar that most people use today, even the non-Gra people, was corrected by the Gra. So I think the Gra, every correction that he made in the Zohar, he had 150 corroborations for. No, it's 150 cross checks. Now you're saying, so we forget about the understanding of those things. Do you remember 150 things? Who can remember 150 of anything? He said, I have 150 of explanations. Just name them. It's ridiculous. You understand? So that kind of thing. So the mental capacity that a person would have to be a yeshiva man back in those days, I was told even much later, he would come to the yeshiva, he would come to the door and say, I want to study in the yeshiva. So they would say, we're studying Baba Kama. No, at the door they'd say, tell us Baba Kama. At the door, recite Baba Kama. If you know Baba Kama, then you can come in to study Baba Kama. We have no books over here. If you know the text, you can come into the yeshiva and study. Go tell Baba Kama. My father, may rest in peace. It's a simple thing, but when he was a kid, they were poor when they grew up, so they all went to work as fast as they could. So he got his first shul. He was 21 already. So when he came to the city, he was the new kid on the block, and all these older guys. He's a pipsqueak. Who is he? So it was a Sunday afternoon. You have to think way back then, when who had a Jewish bookstore. Baltimore. Oh. Yes, it was a Sunday afternoon. So the elder rabbi, there's supposed to be a chuppah My father's supposed to be for a bracha, whatever it is. But it turned out that they didn't have a ksuba. No, go get a ksuba on a Sunday afternoon, in those days.
Right on the back of the
So
bill.
my father sat down and by heart he wrote out the ksuba for them. So they were so impressed, already made his bones, So the joke is, of course, is that memorizing something per se is not such a big deal, but that's not the point. But it was those times is considered a big deal. Then you think about just memory is ridiculous. You look, for example, the Malbim, one of my heroes. I mean, I'm sure many people's hero, my personal heroes. So he has a simple book. He wants to distill for you simply, so you'll understand how Chazal understood Psukim. So he distilled it down to 613 simple rules. He wrote a book called the Yelas HaShachar. It's in the beginning of Vayikra. So he writes a book. Here, just get these 613 points and you're done. It's easy. It's easy after this. So, it could be, but the point that was put in Lamaisi, he came over and say, just get these by 613 simple tricks and you got it. It's easy, no problem. So the joke is, of course, so a lot of times for them, what we consider, today, for example, there's a modern, today, it's already been going for years already. There's a mathematics thing called fractals. So the original theory of fractals was old, but it only came into its own in modern times. Why? Because the simple amount of repetitive calculations, not even the biggest deal, couldn't be done. They couldn't substantiate the understanding of fractals. Then they had computers, they could do thousands and thousands and thousands of the calculations.
So I forgot what a fractal is. Explain it.
I'll leave the fractals to you to explain.
It's a continued fraction, right?
Yes. But my point is what? My point is that even the simple point of it wasn't the deepest problem in the world. It was a simple problem of repetitive calculation, right. But it took till modern time because human beings couldn't do it. That's all you needed. You need to have a machine to do it. So because the tradition was so cumbersome. Remember, the Mishnayos itself, which is down to 6 orders, was distilled from 600. Our Mishnayos, just 6, was boiled down from 600. It was voluminous. You understand the sheer weight of what a person had to know in order to be a student of Torah was ridiculous. So parity in Mishnayos was extremely important. There was, what I mean to say, balance between ratios and seifas. There had to be almost like there was a tune first of all. Yeah, in mnemonics and tunes and balancing and intuition, all kinds of things, but to make the thing wieldy. So you see it, so you can also hold on to it. So the Gemara says, listen, don't worry. Really, you're right. This brisa should have chosen in the first case a much simpler case. To teach the proof, to teach the point of a stolen party being unable to testify against the original claimant because of being interested. You didn't need such a complicated case of that Reuven stole it from Shimon and sold it to Levi, and Yehuda is going against him. And the question of whether Shimon can go against you. Even to remember all the names is too much. I don't even like names. I like numbers. You understand? But anyway, but okay. So the Gemara says, why do you need such a complicated case? You could have taught the same thing simply. Then what? Shimon stole it, and now Yehuda is claiming that Reuben stole it from Shimon, and now Yehuda is claiming that Shimon never owned it. Shimon can't testify against him. Why? Because he wants to back up the thief. He wants to defend the thief, so he'll have an easier time getting his money back from the thief and not getting it from the guy. The Gemara says, you're right, but I needed to balance together with the end of the since I wanted to have parity. That's why you read this whole long introduction. Since we're going to have parity with the end of the brisa, where it's a case where the guy sold movables, a cow or a garment, which case he can because he's not considered interested. The dafka mochar, okay, it's only a case where it can't be a case where he's directly defending the thief. It has to be where the thief sold it to somebody else. And why is that? The Havila Yesh Vishina Rishus, because only when the thief stole it does the person who bought it have rights to the object, because we have a rule that when a person, remember, a Gazan is a thief who pulls it away from you, and the guy gives up hope, and the thief transfers the ownership to somebody who he sold it to. So then the person has no hope of what? Of getting it back. The person who's stolen from can't get it back from the buyer. Why? Because the buyer acquired the object with what? With the abandonment of hope and the transfer of ownership. Okay, but where he didn't sell it, and where the thief was in the hands of the thief, the Hadrale, where what? He's going to be able to get back the actual object from the thief. Okay, therefore what? He can't testify. So how to tell me in order to say that he was disinterested, the only way he could be disinterested was if the thief sold it, because if the thief didn't steal it, he could still get it back to the thief as an interested party. That is a ton of Reishanami. So you're right. In the ratio, even though it didn't have to be that complicated, for the sake of parity, I thought we also case of selling what, so I can be able to remember the things. You understand, to keep it together. You have to realize how important these things are. By the way, and when I explained to you also in the same way that I told that they wrote it that way, if you'll hear what I'm saying, this is how you learn it. When you pay attention to the structure, and that's why I'm a big student of structure and a big teacher of structure, because when you pay attention to the structure, you remember it. That's how you get the story. You don't have to, if you have to memorize things cold, you have to be a savant. If you're not nuts, you're not gonna remember everything. You see, but this way you can remember. I have a Sefer Nami. Now the Gemara says, 1 second. 1 second. You're pulling the wool over my eyes. What good is it when you have Yeush and Shina Rishus? Let's say somebody stole something and you gave up hope and he sold it to somebody. Okay, you can't get back the object. But what do you mean you don't get the money? You're going to get the money back. Okay, but Sefer Nami, Didi Yosh Migupe. Okay, what are you talking about? Since when is the guy disinterested? He's still gonna want to be able to get his money back. And therefore, what he still wants to defend and claim that that the object that was stolen belonged to him and not to the original person. Okay, so therefore, how can you tell me that the guy is allowed to testify because he's not going to get anything? He's not getting anything back. When I said Lo Tzricha, you're right. I'll tell you why. Even though normally the guy would be able to get the money back, you need it. Why? The misgazlan, because the gazlan died, and once the gazlan died, then you can't even get the money back. But it's not because we learned. Let's say a guy stole something and he gave it to his children to consume. Or if he just or even if he left them the object itself. But it's not real estate. But they're not obligated to pay. Why? Because they didn't steal it. So therefore, once he died, and his yesh and shina rishus, you can't even get the money back. He says, 1 second. But I have another kasha to you. He says, even if you want to tell me the case, because it's a pretty convoluted case that you told me, that Reuben stole it from Shimon and sold it to Levi, and Yehuda is claiming that it would never belong to Shimon, and Shimon can or cannot. He says, listen, but Lokma B'Yorish, why didn't? Okay, again, he says, why didn't you tell me a simple case that he can't testify on behalf of the person who bought it from the thief? Lokma B'Yorish, why don't you just say it simply what? Why don't you say it's a thief who didn't sell it, okay? But he stole it. He stole it, and then what? And then he died, and his kids inherited. So why don't you just make it a case of the guy who was stolen from fighting with the inheritors of the thief, okay? And therefore what? And you can say what? And because they don't have to pay anything back. So therefore, what is telling me what? 1 second. He can't testify against the original claimant against the orphans. Why? Because since it's land, he's gonna be able to get it back from the children. Okay, because that works. Because remember, land they do have to pay, and he can't. Therefore, he can't testify. So why don't you make it simple? Why go so far? Okay. Oh, it's very good. According to the opinion that inheritors are not considered buyers. That what? It's considered the same. It's very good according to the opinion that holds what inheritors are not like buyers. In other words, so when it comes to a buyer, there's yesh and a change. Okay, but when it comes to children, there's no change of rishus. Shapir. Okay, it makes sense why it didn't talk about the case of what of an inheritor, because the truth of inheritor. Why? Because then he's going to be able to get it back from them because there's not a change of domain. But according to the opinion, that inheritors are just like buyers, and also inheritors acquire it. Okay, so then Michael and Maimar. Okay, then why can't you teach that case? Well, Od Kasha. Okay, we could have talked about a Yorish. Well, Od Kasha, another Kasha. Well, Kasha Leilabai. Probably another Kasha he has. If Nei Shachrayus Olav. Okay, when you tell me the language of what, because his intention, his aim is not to this guy, or his aim is not to that guy. Okay, and you had to talk about what, that you want to come back and have recourse to the person that you're defending. Okay, and we don't use that language is not a normal language. If Neishu Choseres Lo, V'nei Choseres Lo, the normal way to say that was because he comes back to him, or or it doesn't come back to him. Okay, yeah, but it shouldn't have talked about the aim. Usually, achrais means you're responsible. So for those reasons, those are compelling reasons to say that it's far fetched to explain the brisa the way that he did. And therefore, what? Therefore, so and even though, as they point out, even though the halachas that we just learned are true, but as far as saying that this is the case of the brisa, let's drop it and let's propose another explanation of the brisa. Okay, to the Rabbi Bashmul, the Rabbi Bashmul, this is what he said. We learned this earlier. If a person sold somebody a field with no guarantee, in other words, he said, "Listen, if people grab it away from you, I'm not paying you back." Even when he's not responsible, he still cannot. Why? He knows when he's responsible. For sure, he can't. When he's responsible to back it up if it's clawed away from the buyer, it's obvious that he can't testify on behalf of the buyer because he's an interested party because he's stopping the buyer from coming back in to collect. But even when there's no guarantee, he still can't. Why? Because even if all he succeeded was defending the buyer, he would still leave a place for his creditor who had lent him money before he sold the field to that buyer to take his pay from the field of the buyer. Okay, so he still has the benefit. He's still an interested party. But dafka buys or sada, but it's only a house or a field. However, part of it when it comes to because those things are going to stand as a lien for the loan that he took before he sold the field or the house. Part of it when it comes to a cow or a garment. Loma Baya. So he says it's obvious that Bistama, that in the normal case, where he did not make any special arrangement for his creditor to be paid back from these movables, the lo mishtabdale, okay, where these movables have no lien in them from any loan that it might have taken. Okay, my time, what's the reason? Because they're movables. And we totally love. And it's an established principle that movables can never stand as a surety for a person who gave a loan. When a person gives a loan and you had land and you sold it, that land is a surety for the loan. But if you had a cow or a cow or a garment when you borrowed money and you sold them, they're not going to stand in for it. Either because there's no way to protect the people who buy them because they'll never hear about it because it doesn't make enough noise, or because by definition no lender will ever rely on it because you can always hide it. Because of lay, and even if he wrote this, even if a guy who took a loan and said, I'll you can take the shirt off my back, even if he said you collect that, even if he said you can collect it, that's only when the movables are still in his possession. When it's not by him, they still don't stand as a guarantee. So it goes with that. It's clear, Isabel, for sure, even when he didn't make any arrangement. Even if he said, listen, when I pay you, you're getting paid from this cow, you're getting paid from this talus. Okay, it still doesn't stand as a guarantee for the loan. My time, okay, the Rabba, like Rabba Dama because Rabba said, also if a person says from this slave you're going to collect my debt and then he sells it, then you're right indeed. If he said you're going to get paid from this slave and then he sold the slave, then the guy can claw back his loan from the person who bought the slave. But but even if he said by an ox, he said from this ox you're going to collect.
A slave has the same thing as car.
In this case,
so why is it?
Yeah. No, the other way. He can collect from him. It's fine.
But why does it have to even say that?
Oh, okay, that we can talk about. Okay, I'm not ready at the moment. But if he made the cow or the donkey a place to collect from, even if he said specifically from these things, he's not going to be able to collect. My timer. What's the reason? Hi, Islay Kala. Why? Because when you sell the slave, there's a sound comes out. That's the main point. What the people hear about it. Okay, and therefore they can protect themselves. So it's legal. It's just to leave the buyers liable to the original loan. Well, less they call it, but when you sell objects, even though you put the lien on the specifically, it won't be fair to the buyer, and therefore it doesn't work. Okay,
Sorry, I forgot the meaning of the word apotiki.
You're going to stand on this. You're going to get your pay from this plane. You're going to get paid. I'm specifically designating this to be to back up the loan. So you can collect from you. Okay, okay. Now, so therefore, what? So the Gemara says, 1 second. And so therefore, uh, uh,
That's all.
yeah. So that we explain us. So now says the Gemara, 1 second. 1 second. How can you tell me that movables don't back up a loan? And the whole point here, what it's saying here is like this. Here, when it comes to the real estate, he has an interest. When it comes to movables, he has no interest because it's not going to come back to him. Says, what are you talking about? What? How can you tell me absolutely that even on these movables that he's never an interested party because it's never going to come back to him? There is a way that he can make movables liable to the lien, in which case it would come back to him. Why? Because we learned the let's say I want to sell the responsibility of these movables together with land, just like I can sell movables if I want to. I can sell you a piece of land and you'll acquire the land the normal ways by paying money or with the paper or by showing ownership in the land, and at the same moment you'll also acquire movables. So I can do the same thing, and the same way that I can that now, and there's a big noise happening. So the same way that I can now put a lien on the land, if I sell the movables with the land, they get the benefit of that type of sale. There's also a sound, and therefore what? He acquires the land, he acquires the metaltalin, and now what? And these metaltalin, these movables really will have a lien on them, and therefore what? If he defends the person, so therefore it's going to come back. He's really defending himself because he's self-interest because the guy's not going to be able to come back to him. So Rav Chisda said, okay, but who the cost of lay? Okay, the low kasmachto katos the okay, but you do have to say what? You still have to, even to do that in order to make such a sale work. He has to write that that it's not an empty promise. Remember, we said when a guy makes an asmachta, for example, he says, listen, if that happens, I'll eat my hat. So he's really assuming, he's relying that it's never going to happen. So he said those kind of things are not liable. You have to write, it's not like an empty promise, nor is it merely, or is this paper merely a form, and I'm not really making a contract, I'm just writing up a form to copy from. Okay, so therefore what? So why don't you worry then that maybe, how can you tell me absolutely in the Brisa that every time it was metaltalin, that if he sold it, he'll always be able to testify, maybe the metaltalin really got a lien on them and he's really testifying in his own self-interest? Says, no, I'll tell you why. Here's what happened. From the minute that he bought this cow or this talus, the second later, he sold it. So there was not time for him to have taken a loan between the acquisition of these movables and the sale. Okay, but I said in the moment we have a test. I Dilma, the Akne, Dilma, and the Iknehu. 1 second. He says maybe. Maybe he wrote, but I have a problem. Even if we know that he didn't take a loan, I have a problem. Maybe when he takes the loan, he writes a funny paper. It's like this: the guy writes this, and I'm borrowing money from you, and everything, not only that, everything I own now, and anything that I'll acquire later will also back up this loan. When he took the paper of loan, you told me, okay, listen, we're sure that this guy did not take a loan between the buying of the object and the selling. So it can't be that it's going to come back to him. 1 second. He says, how do you know? Maybe here's what happened. He sold them the stuff together with land, which means what? That responsibility can go on. 1 second, you say I had no loan. It doesn't matter. Maybe he'll take a loan. Maybe he took a loan before. And he said, and anything that I acquire in the future will also back up the loan. He wrote that everything I'm going to acquire. Okay. So what, you're forced to say what? So Alma, you're gonna have to answer me. Shmamino the acne, the acne, the acne. If a person says that everything I'm going to acquire is going to back it up, and then he bought something and sold it, or he bought something and he left it as an inheritance, but it doesn't work. So you have to say what? You have to be forced to say the Brisa holds that such a trick doesn't work. I got a problem, but later it's an argument whether it works or not. So I can't say the Brisa. Remember, I told we did this a few times. We can say that the people in the future who argued can't have misread. So therefore, you can't let the Brisa decide one side because there could have been an argument. I said, I'll tell you why. The Kamri Adam, here's what happened. The witness is an incredible case. Here's a case where the witness said, "What we know, he didn't take any loans between when he got it and when he sold it." Well, we can back off on that in a minute. But we said, "What the Kamredim Yadinim Beid V'Hai." Okay, the Lohavi are we this guy right? Okay, this guy never had any land, so it was impossible for him to have. We know from the day he was bar mitzvah. We know this guy. We've been holding his hand since the day he was bar mitzvah. And we know that he never acquired any land. We've been with him day and night. We're such good friends with him. He never acquired. He never acquired land, and therefore he never was able to sell the movables on top of the land. And we don't. And therefore we don't have to worry about the possibility that he took a loan and said anything that I acquire in the future will do it. Amar Papa, and we know. Okay, Amar Papa. Our Papa says another point. He says. So Gemara says 1 second. Still, how can you tell what you're saying? Didn't my Papa say? Didn't my Papa teach me that even if a guy sold the field without any responsibility, and he said I'm not going to be, but when his creditor came and took the field to claw back money that he lent him, so the person, so the buyer can't come back and claim his loss. Nimtze she'ena shalo. Okay, so it comes out interestingly enough that pardon me, and then it comes out that the field that
didn't belong to him.
That it turns out it never was his to start with. In other words, it was really stolen. Now he can come back to him. Okay, why is that? Because he says to him, listen, he said for a different reason, not because let me explain the case. The guy says, I'm selling you a field, but I'm not responsible. If my creditors take it, let's say I'm giving you a good price. You want to take a risk? Take a risk. Okay, so you're right. So normally the case would be what? The case would be if the creditors take it, he's finished. Goodbye, Charlie. But what if if it's not creditors, somebody comes on and proves that what? We have witnesses that the guy who sold him never owned it
to begin with.
He said, listen, I'm selling to you with no responsibility. You sold to me that responsibility. That responsibility was that if you legally own the field, there was a lien on it. That I can't have no recourse. But you can't tell me you sold to me with that responsibility because you don't own it. That's not a sale without responsibility. You're just a cheat. There was no sale. You're a crook. You never sold anything to me. That's not a sale. You can't. I sold you the Brooklyn Bridge, with no responsibility. You didn't own the Brooklyn Bridge. You can't tell me that. If you sold the Brooklyn Bridge and your creditors take the Brooklyn Bridge, fine. Okay, but you can't sell the Brooklyn Bridge. You didn't own the Brooklyn Bridge. So therefore, he says he can come back to him as recourse, not because of a guarantee. I'm coming back because you're a fraud.
Tell that to Mr. Ponzi.
Mr. Ponzi, exactly. You never sold it to me. So I said, what am I going to do now? So again, okay, still got a kasha. So still, it's going to be what he does. He still has a reason to be tested. How can you let him testify on behalf? How can you let him testify on behalf of the guy? Okay, he's defending himself. Don't worry. He says, it's a case where the buyer himself admits, let's say that given donkey belonged to him. He says it's the daughter of his donkey because later, but he admits the buyer himself believed that it was the object of the person who sold it to him. Okay, and therefore what? And once you say, how's he going to claim this? And you defrauded me. He himself admitted that it belonged to him. Rav Zavi disagrees. So Omar says, I feel him say Shaloh. He says, even if it comes out, it's not his Eino Choser alone. He still has no right to go. He has to have recourse normally because he says, no, the truth is, he says that even that, when I sell you without responsibility, I'm not even claiming that I own it. When I absolve myself of all responsibility, I mean to say what, even if I never owned it. Now, both say thank you. That was a little more complicated than I detailed it. But I hope we'll get through. Chicago.
Why is there a clear distinction between the cow and the lamb?
Okay, so there's a lot of distinctions. Generally, number one, movables don't become liable to a lien. You can't put a lien on movables. I took for one of two reasons. Either because anybody who buys that object can't defend themselves because they can't have known. By land, you'll always know if there's a lien on land on these things. Okay,
do a title search.
But when it comes to movables, the guy might not have heard that there was never a lien on it, and therefore we can't allow liens to come in. That's one answer. Another answer is that nobody will lend money on movables because they can be hidden. So that's why it's real estate. You know, so the only thing that people will the only things that people will take as to back up money, to back up a loan, is real estate. In Israel, you have a problem because they don't
own the land.
That's part. And another problem is because the laws are such, the laws are so incredibly biased in favor of the occupant. In favor of the occupant, nobody wants to lend you money against the house because you can't, even if you own the house, you can't get the guy out. And almost every contract now in Israel they sign, you have to sign when you do anything with a property, you waive all rights of the occupant. In Israel, every contract says I waive all my rights, because if they don't, you can never get a guy out of a house. So banks are not so quick. Banks are not happy to give loans against houses.
And when they do, it's only in US dollars.
Yeah, they can't get anybody out of the houses. You say they can't. So it doesn't work. But that's the answer. But the simple answer is that so there's two reasons. One is that movables can't get a lien and houses can. And there's two reasons. Either because if you put a lien on movables, the buyers aren't protected, or because no lender will ever do it because they can't protect their investment, because you can hide movables as opposed to land, which can't be hidden. You can't move land. That's the whole point.
Yep.
That's why I told you that principle, Karka and exilis, that land can't be stolen. People, the militants don't like what I'm saying, and God bless them all. Understand? But the point is like this: one of the reasons why the Jewish people were never nervous throughout the exile is because
Israel's always going to be there.
It's there. We know where it is. You're not taking it. You're not taking it away. You're not taking Israel to Mars. We know where it is. We'll get there. It's not going to go anyplace.
There was a guy here.
Yeah.
He lived here, who bought an apartment in Jerusalem in 1952. And the mortgage was in lirot. By the time it was a 30-year mortgage, in the 80s, early 80s, when he was first paying, the stamp in him to send it overseas was more expensive than the check he wrote.
That's what happens. Yeah. They stopped that. I told you.
Now you can only buy in dollars.
So I was told, and I can't prove it, but I was told by the clerk. They told me that but in 1970,
there was already still dollars. Then.
No, in 73, I got the last unlinked mortgage in the history of the country. Unlinked. The last unlinked mortgage.
You mean in lira?
It was liras. It was liras.
It was still liras.
It was still liras. It was liras, and it was unlinked. And
unlinked. What is unlinked?
No, with
not in dollars.
Because of this problem that he just explained to you. That by the time you paid it off, it wasn't worth anything. So they started making all the mortgages linked to the dollar. So if you didn't get a mortgage for 1,000 lira, it was 1,000 lira at dollars. So that you were really essentially borrowing
it in dollars.
But doesn't that exchange rate change throughout?
Yeah, but
you
generally protected it.
Dollars.
It protected the lender. You weren't paying necessarily. You'd have to pay the physical dollar, but you're paying the rate of dollars. So they told me I got the last unlinked mortgage in the history of the country. That's what they told me.
But did they fix the rate at the time?
No, that was the whole point. They didn't. That was the whole point.
That was
the whole point. They didn't want to fix it. They wanted you to pay back whatever the dollar was going to be. You got to pay dollars at that point.
If you borrow 500,000 shekels, that's worth $100,000. Okay. So they say
you essentially borrowed
$1,000,
right?
That you have to pay at 5 shekels to the dollar, whatever it now is.
Right.
So in 20 years, when it's 83 shekels to the dollar, you're still paying at 5 shekels to the dollar, or in dollars, actually.
There came one point where the largest percentage of people with mortgages were underwater. They owned.
That's because it went the other way.
Yeah, and they owed more. They owed more than they borrowed.
Well, that's what happened here in the.
Well, that happens in Canada all the time because they make mortgages in U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
No, but also in the United States, all the time, those things that still allow them to do it. You have to borrow to 125% of your house value.
Really?
Yeah, they can't do that anymore.
Because
now the most is 5.
You're underwater from the day one.
Now they're a lot. Now they can do 103. That's a limit, and that's a special deal for first time buyers.
Yeah, because they want to give them an opportunity to get.
But I remember back in the 70s, where I had a
You remember
mortgage
back in the
at-
seventies?
Yeah, and I had a mortgage at 17%.
Yeah, my-
And it was because a Yid gave me the money and was doing me a favor.
Uh-huh.
I paid
happened in my
off my
room.
first mortgage in Israel with after a substantial mortgage for a house. I paid off after a couple years, I paid off $200. Why did I pay it off? I paid it off to become a guarantor. My Rebbe bought, the guy later became the president of Israel, Rivlin.
Rivlin?
Yeah, my Rebbe bought a building from Rivlin and his brother. And in order for me to be a guarantor for the mortgage, so I had to not have a mortgage. So I paid off my mortgage with $200. With 200, I paid off my mortgage, and then I was able to be a guarantor.
$200 paid off your mortgage?
And I told you I had the last unlinked mortgage in the city of the country.
Wow.
I was really lucky.
but-
Yeah, so after several years, just a couple of years, after a couple of years, the whole mortgage in the house was gone with $200.
Wow.
That was it.
Oh, no.
I lucked out. I lucked out.
Mina Shemayim.
It was Mina Shemayim.
Have a great day.
Well,
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you. It was.
Like, you know that not the shekel, the
Yeah.
river was gonna go bust when you bought it, and the people probably said you're crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
they know. The truth is, I was a kid and I was afraid, and they were laughing at me. They were always. I was afraid to sign the paper.
Yeah.
And they were laughing. He said, "I'll pay you for this mortgage. Give it to me. I'll pay you to just take it. I'll buy for it." They were laughing at me. That was like for being stupid. That. Thank God. They were right.
But you're talking about real estate. At one time, a person I knew very well got into trouble by the feds, so I had to be bailed out. So they will only take as somebody who had owned property. Since I own the house, I'm owning
Right.
property. And proving that I just bought the house, and then the electrician, the whole industry went belly up and
Hey.
everything else. So just my eyeballs in debt.
Hey,
So I go in front of the magistrate there, and the lawyer for my friend says, "This man's a man of substance."
a man of substance.
I don't have two nickels put together. So because I had a house, I was considered a man of substance.
Good for you. God
That was
bless you.
it, because
You
of
are a
real
man of
estate.
substance.
The same things don't change.
That's hysterical. That is hysterical.
When I went back to work, I told my partner this story. I should never tell him about. That's why he never called me my name. The man of
Man of
substance.
That's good. You get thrown into things. It's
And also, I think the difference when I got my mortgage, I got it at 7.5%, 7.5%.
yeah.
What a bargain!
It was a bargain, exactly.
Today, you're nuts. Why you take shit more?
Right. Right.
Hey,
Yeah, I know.
but of
What a
course,
crazy world. Repeating fraction, right? That's the point. It made all these patterns. But when years ago when I opened the yeshiva, I was learning kilaim. I think I told you. So
Yeah.
kilaim is mixed seeds.
Right.
So kilaim is a very interesting. I hope we learn it one day together. Kilaim is an interesting because it's a combination of simple mathematics, ratios and percentages and fractions, but it also has to do with perception. So the laws are not only what the pure numbers are; it's also what it looks like. It's a very interesting kind of. It's hard to make a formula because it's pure math and perception. In any case, my parents were coming to visit, and so I was going with my brother to the airport.
Yeah.
So in the taxi, so I told him I'm